When teams transcend, the outcome can be 1000x better. So, one man becoming Superman, 10x. A team transcending, 1000x. So imagine the kind of impact you would have when you are having accelerated success. You're getting your team, your family, whoever is around you to also experience accelerated success. And they're growing, and you're now beginning to influence the ecosystem you're part of. And maybe, within the next 10 years or so, you transcend that entire community. There were people from different walks of life, and it was not just that there were different age groups, but also that the intent of those people. In the open source groups, they're generally helping people. They're there to help each other, support each other, create impact in the world, do something. I think those kind of ecosystems are very, very, very important. Our book should be releasing in about 2 months, I think. So I think we have a chapter there. One of the pillars we have is called Transcending an Ecosystem. A lot of times, you come into an ecosystem, and the way I think about ecosystems is, let's say you go and visit a hospital. Now, the way the doctor treats you, the way the staff treats you, it's not how they want to treat you alone. It's also based on who came in there before, what happens in the administration, what happens in the medical field, what happens in the pharmaceutical system. If a gynecologist was sued just the previous day by for something she didn't do that wasn't her fault, and then you happen to go into that clinic that evening, now, of course, they're going to do their duty, but then, your experience is going to be very different from a happy place. And so a lot of things that happen is because, it's not the individual, it's an ecosystem. I mean, when you think of war, it's very cruel. When you think of war, sometimes these soldiers, they're sent as a front line, and everybody knows they're going to die. And it's not about how brave they are, how smart they are, what is their training. It's they can die so that someone else can, go and capture that post. And in some wars, especially in World War II, it was terrible that soldiers were sent and with no chance of winning, and so that the enemy is distracted on one side, and then they might have an opportunity on the other. And so in the war example, it's exaggerated. And there was, I think, there were certain situations where the choice that the soldiers had was either go friend and be shot by the enemy, or turn back and be shot by your country. In those situations, it's exaggerated. But if you think of it, the soldier has not much choice. The commander sending the soldiers doesn't have much choice. It's the setup. And the setup is part of an ecosystem of countries that have gotten into a certain situation. And it's not different when a patient walks into a hospital. The laws governing in that state, in that country, what happened yesterday, what happens after. So the ecosystem kind of translates how things happen. And so an ecosystem is different from a community. Community is a group of people with one vision. But an ecosystem is just different things, different groups of people working at different layers. They may not directly be connected to each other, but they're, at the end of the day, translating the experience of a patient walking into the hospital. So the hospital is one example of an ecosystem. And then, you have ecosystem at your job, you have ecosystem in corporates, and the setup makes a big difference. I mean, in 2014, one of these Fortune 100 companies really wanted us to do something for them, and I was talking to the chief HR over there, and she was curious to know what we can do for our employees. And at the end of what I said, she was terrified. She said, "You're making them, all these fishes, into sharks. Who will manage them?" And she said, "We want to contain them in our pots." They were running a call center. It's a huge company. They had a call center wing. And she said that most of their employees in the call center, they become very expensive when they become senior. And so she said, "I want to maintain a healthy attrition. I want to have 7 to 8% attrition." So she's saying, I know I'm making, what it translated to me is, she's saying, I know I'm making some people unemployable. I'm okay with that as long as they serve her company for 4 years, and then she would get rid of them, fully knowing that they're going to be unemployable other places. And she said, I don't want to develop them because, then already they're asking for increments. And she said, so what I want you to design, and she said, can you design a motivation program that keeps them happy with, a form of gamification. So the gamification work with some incentives based on certain things where they might make a little more money because, they're doing certain things by protocol, but they're not necessarily growing. And after 4 years, they're going to become irrelevant, and about 9% would get fired. And she said that is cheaper to me than paying for the new employees, training them, and paying the recruitment fee was cheaper for her than retaining these people over a long run. But fully knowing that she's brain damaging them, that 4 years later that they're not employable. Now imagine one uninformed employee joins that company and he's thinking it's about him. But he's part of an ecosystem. He's part of an ecosystem where her behavior is rewarded, where she is rewarded for that, where that organization, because they can control cost in a particular way, is rewarded by the buyers. So it's a full ecosystem, and this uninformed person is walking in there, and it's not all about him or her. It's about where that person is part of. So one of the things that you develop, I think when you come the second time and third time to up, is you develop systemic thinking, your ability to understand how invisible forces work together to create something. Now, obviously, you can't develop systemic thinking when you're so stuck about your problems. So that's why the first up takes care of it. And you may not know it because first up is superior capabilities installed. The second up is capability awareness. And the reason we call second up is capabilities awareness is because it means until then you're not aware of the capabilities. I always talk about this to my team that, the movie Spider-Man, the spider comes and it bites him. And the guy is only aware that, something happened, that, something bit, and then he was sick for 2 days, and that's all he's aware of. And then one villain comes and tries to punch him. And then, he bends so fast, and then he's like, oh, I can do that. So that's the second up. And then you start seeing what's happening in the ecosystem here, and you're understanding what doctors are doing, what lawyers are doing, what industrialists are doing. So you start understanding, as your predictive intelligence goes up, their life experience becomes your life experience. In big, you actually learn how to do this. And everything that people learn in big, some degree you learn in up. So it's okay if you're an up participant, you still learn some of these things. But specifically at big, what is designed is that you learn systemic thinking so well, and your intuitions develop to a point that someone else's lifetime of experience in a short while becomes your lifetime of experience. Like the way you do installation on others, when you're talking to people, you're like able to not just mirror, but you're able to take their lifetime experience and install it in you as if you have gone through that entire journey. And even when you do a small degree of it at up, and the third time and the fourth time you come and your systemic thinking develops, you become very sensitive to ecosystems. You know what to be a part of, what not to be a part of. You want to know what teams, in your organization you want to be a part of. And how many times you've got people to leave companies, they come terribly. And somehow, imagine that uninformed guy who's going into that company where there's that evil setup, and then he's thinking, I have to be loyal. And I'm like, be loyal to your wife. Not to a company. It's not even a human being. I'm like, no, you have to be careful. You need to know what you're getting into. And so, a lot of times we just get people to change their companies. And I'm not saying all companies are evil. I'm just saying sometimes they're just in a bad setup. And, in certain times in organizations, great organizations, good organizations, it works well for everyone, but the setup would not be so good for a few people. And so if someone is unfortunately stuck in a situation like that, and so many middleman businesses here have changed after coming. One of the worst type of businesses to be in, and you find these companies that manufacture for Apple, that manufacture for all these big companies. They make business in billions, but their loss is also in billions. Because what happens is they're not the brand. And so, they can be replaced like this. If Apple wants, or, Ferrari wants to replace their vendor, there are 100 other people saying, I'll give it to you cheaper and better quality. So the price gets really squeezed out, and the quality demand just keeps increasing. And it's the worst type of businesses to be in. And a lot of people come sometimes with those kind of businesses, and then they're blaming themselves. I'm not disciplined. I ask, when do you start working? They start working at like 7 in the morning, sleep at 10 in the night. And I said, then if that's not discipline to you, what would discipline look like? And people come and kind of keep blaming themselves about, maybe something is not unlocked in my brain. And I said, I agree with you, because when it does, you would change your business. But they keep thinking about it as I can succeed here. I have these big brands. Yeah, because you give the cheapest ways. That's not necessarily a great position to be in. And a lot of people come in that situation with jobs. We just help them to change the job. And because, during a diagnostics, we notice, because we're so sensitive to ecosystems, we notice that they're not going to succeed there. They're not going to flourish there. We ask them to change it. How many times we've helped children, so many problems. We just tell the parents, can you try changing the school? And like wonder, everything in their life changes. Sometimes parents do the opposite, everything is going great and they change the school because they fail to recognize what the ecosystem is doing to the child. And so that's good systemic intelligence, systemic thinking, and predictive intelligence when that happens. And especially when you come, after you get success. See, for me, up is more fun when you're very successful, because then you get all these other layers. So our focus is to get you success so that you can enjoy all the other things that, are better than Harry Potter's wand. They say that, Harry Potter, you can't help people fall in love, and you can't change their character using Harry Potter's wand. And one of the things that we thrive on is, when parents come and they show something that is a character flaw in the child, if the parents change and they see the child changing. So all of these things are very delicious for you to learn. It's very, very sweet after you actually accelerate your success. So that's why it's, a program that you keep coming again and again and again and again, each time for different things. And at some point, and this is what I hope happens, and we've written about this in the book, that at some point you understand an ecosystem, you become a part of the ecosystem, you're a player in the ecosystem. At some point, you begin to influence that ecosystem. And as you become more and more an installation artist, the more you learn how to have integrated life outcomes for yourself, and you're able to create impact, you would start transcending that ecosystem. There are so many times you have companies where there's a small team, there's one person, and then they have an idea and they form a team, and that small team becomes a new wing, and the future of the business changes. It transcends that. The entire company has changed because this small team took the business in a new direction. So, so transcending ecosystem is way, way, way more effective than just individual growth. Actually, there's a guy called Frederick Brooks who was once wrote this book called The Mythical Man Month. And he talks about how when they develop softwares, people used to calculate in terms of how many programmers do you have and how many months do you need. So the man month is a multiplication of the number of developers into the time frame. And his book, Mythical Man Month, he talks about how that's a mythical number. And he was once responsible for a very large project, the largest project at that time in the world in software development. And there was a critical part of it which he was trying to do for 300, I think for 2 years with 300 developers. I'm not sure of the exact number, but something like that. And then he found out, instead of those 300, if he got 30 outliers, he was able to finish it in about 1/5 of the time. and by 1/10 of the people. And there's a definitive difference between being good and being an outlier. But this is where it gets even more interesting, is that they found out that when someone goes from excellence to an outlier, that person is about 10 times more effective. So if someone can do, say, 100 units, the person can do 1,000 units. If someone can do 10 units, that person can do 100 units. But what they found out is when teams transcend, the outcome can be 1,000x better. So, one man becoming Superman, 10x. A team transcending, 1,000x. So imagine the kind of impact you would have when you are having accelerated success. You're getting your team, your family, whoever is around you to also experience accelerated success. And they're growing, and you're now beginning to influence the ecosystem you're part of. And maybe, within the next 10 years or so, you transcend that entire community. Just imagine what that would mean.
We never like to complete our video without giving you the opportunity to personally evolve and launch your legacy. Imagine for a moment, what would it feel like when you are impacting the world positively so much and enhancing your business, your health, your family, and legacy? All of this together simultaneously, continuing to grow leaps and bounds, fast and smoothly. If you've got the right motives, we believe Antano and Harini will be able to help you launch your legacy in compressed time. Get excellence installation-based personal evolution and keep making a difference, starting with yourself.